Up next, time to get back to the Battlestar Galactica universe. Well, hey guys, and welcome back to another Untitled Modeler. So ready to get started here with my first build of the year. This is the landing bay from the reimagined series of Battlestar Galactica. This is a model kit that is available from Cozmic Scale Models. It's a 1/72 scale model of the diorama that we're going to build here. And Cozmic Scales, by the way, also has a 1/32 scale model. You can imagine that's going to be pretty large. But he also has a single section in case you want to display one of the larger 1/32 fighters that were available for Mobius. But this again is a 1/72 scale model, and I did a more detailed box opening for you guys back last year on the channel. I'll post the link to that below if you want to take a look, because I'm not going to go into a lot of detail what comes in this box. But what I plan to do here first is to show you, I'm going to go ahead and piece together the walls just temporarily on some styrene plastic and kind of fill you in on what I have planned for this project. So let's start with that. So this gives you an idea of how this is all going to be laid out. The pieces were printed in white resin, and it measures about 16 inches in length and about 7 inches deep. The pieces come pre-drilled for lighting, and I plan to definitely light this up. It will require 23 SMDs to completely illuminate the piece, and I plan on doing that with chip-size SMDs from Evans Designs. And then they're all going to be hooked up to a AA power source. The walls will be mounted onto flat styrene. In fact, these are the styrene sheets that you see here. Those are 1 millimeter in thickness, and I ordered them from Amazon. A set of 4 roughly 8x10 sheets were included, and I will be gluing 2 of them together to make the flooring. This will all then be glued onto some Foamular. It's going to be very similar to what I did with the Starfleet AirTram build. Now, as you can see, this is a very accurate rendering, and this is because the kit was designed using blueprints. Modeler Donald Dremmer reached out to me after I posted a review of the kit last fall, and he was kind enough to share some of those blueprints with me, and in turn, he gave me permission to share them with you. Let's go and take a look. Now, he said he started drawing them up because he was interested in scratch building a landing bay, and he eventually got input from set designers Larry Stringer and Doug Drexler. Doug is someone you might know from Star Trek. The blueprints, as I said, were then used to design the model kit. So a lot of things to work on here with this kit, and I'm going to be doing it in phases. The first phase is going to be working with all of the walls, getting those put together and painted and put onto our base. So to get started with that, I'm going to start by priming, and then we'll apply our base color of light gray. There's only 2 colors, I believe, that have to go into this. There might be some other metallic colors, I take that back, but most of it's going to be light gray with a duck egg blue trim. And before applying those colors, I'll be doing some pre-shading, and because that's going to definitely help with weathering. So this is going to be a fun project because there's going to be a lot of weathering to do. I really enjoy doing that. So once all of that is completed, and that will include the lighting for the interior of the diorama and everything, we'll move on to the next phase, which will be building the ships. I've got some 1/72 scale Mark 7 Vipers here, and I also have the Mark 2s as well. And then we'll move on to all of the other little things we'll be adding in here, including figures and some miscellaneous equipment. All right, we've got lots to work on here. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I have the pieces primed now, and just kind of looking at the walls here and figuring out how we're going to address these gaps. I have 2 sections glued together, and you can see we have these gaps to fill in. And this one in particular is pretty wide and deep, and so the choices, of course, would be filling that in with putty, but I'm not confident I can actually make that look right because we've got this detailing here, and if I try to sand that, I'd probably sand some of this away too, so it's kind of a weird angle to get into. So the other option we have is to fill that in with styrene plastic. So we have a strip of styrene here we could put into place there, so that's definitely one option. The other seam I have to address is on the floor, but these are a lot tighter. This can easily be covered by applying some putty there, so I don't think that's a big deal. But this all has to be done before we start painting and doing anything else. And I do think it would be best to do these sorts of things before we apply any of our base color for sure. So let me go ahead and get started with that. I am going to go ahead and paint the backside black to help with light blocking, because we will have some SMDs right up against these walls here, and we don't want any light leakage through the wall there. So I'll get started with that, get you caught up here in a second. So all 4 sections of the wall are glued together. I ended up just using flat styrene to cover the gaps, and I want to say this is about 0.75 to maybe ½ millimeter styrene sheet. I just happen to have the stuff in my drawer, but it's out of its original package. I'm not sure exactly how thick this is, but I want to say about 3/4 millimeter thickness. And I used the same styrene sheet to cover or add some reinforcements to these joints here on this side. So what's next now is to cover these seams along the walkway. You'll be able to see these from this angle, so I want to be sure I cover these. You'll notice though there are gaps on this side as well, but this is the only one that needs to be addressed, because this is going to be covered by this section, and these here are going to be covered by these wall sections. Okay, well the seams are now filled in, and for this I chose to use Bondo glazing putty since they were deeper and heavier gaps, and it worked really well. To do this, I ended up taping alongside each of the seams to prevent spillover of the Bondo, and once dried I sanded them smooth, and this really didn't take much time to accomplish. Next, I noticed there were some gaps alongside the strips of styrene, so I used the trick I always use for this type of stuff. I applied plastic putty along the sides and wiped away the excess with a wet Q-tip. And this is how it looks now after another application of the Duplicolors Filler Primer. And along the back side, you can see I primed it with black. Okay, well we're ready now to apply some pre-shading, and this will be done by spraying black all along the grid pattern as well as the detailing along the dividing walls. Okay, so all the pieces now have been painted, and I chose to use a white gray versus light gray as suggested by the instructions. I started out with that, but it looked a little too dark, and so I lightened it up with some white. One thing that concerned me was that I plan on applying a wash to this, and I know that can darken things up a bit further, so I think this was a good direction to go because of that. Now I did start out with some pre-shading as you see here, but I think you could skip this step. It really didn't add much to the back wall, so I decided to not proceed with the dividing walls. Alright, well next is to apply some trim along the bottom of all these pieces. The instructions recommend using duck egg blue, which looks like this. It's a bit brighter than the one seen in this reference photo. Now I do have this color here on hand called Robin's Egg Blue. It's something I got at Michael's, which is actually very, very close to Duck Egg Blue. But I think I'm going to play around with this a little bit and create just a darker shade of Duck Egg Blue instead. So let me get to that, and I'll get you caught up here in a moment. So lots of masking and painting this afternoon. The Duck Egg Blue trim color is confined to the lower parts of the dividing walls, and then the walkway and the lower section of the back wall. All of this masking can be a little tedious, as most masking can be, but in the end it's well worth the effort. So happy with the way the Duck Egg Blue turned out. I darkened the Robin's Egg Blue with a couple drops of Vallejo Model Colors Dark Sea Gray, and that worked great to tone it down. I really thought it was just a bit too bright. As for the dark screens that you see up here, I went that route because of what I saw with this reference shot. It looks to be a dark gray here. And for this, I hand brushed Monument Hobbies Dark Warm Gray, and that went on pretty easily. Well, it's time to move on to the wash, and that's why, as you see, everything's been gloss coated. So we're going to apply a black wash to this, and along with that, I'll probably end up using some MIG ammo solutions and a few other things. We'll see how that goes. All right, lots still left to do. Let's move on. So applying now the wash, and I'm using here this Vallejo black wash, and just liberally applying it to the entire surface here of the back wall. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and set this aside and let it dry. In the meantime, I'm going to work on those pipes that are on the dividing walls. So I'm going to go ahead and mask these off, and these pipes are actually a gunmetal, as you can see in this reference picture. And there's really no easy way to get around this. We're going to have to hand brush this. So one thing I've learned over the years is metallic paint does not brush on very evenly. So what I'm going to do to avoid any problems is to actually paint this a dark gray first. This dark gray will basically act as a primer. So now that I have this dark undertone already painted on, I don't exactly have to get the pipe completely covered by the gunmetal. Doing it this way prevents this uneven look and you're not going to have any of the white that was underneath there peek through your metallic paint. And this is how it turns out. Alright, well now that those pipes are done, we can go ahead and wipe this wash off now. And just going to use some water and a cloth here to get a lot of this off. And really what we want is to have residue all along the little crevices. So the benefit, of course, of applying that gloss coat is you can easily wipe off a lot of it. If this surface was dry, all this stuff would stick to the paint. And we got some nice buildup there along the corners and all along the grid pattern here. I really do like the Vallejo wash. If you don't want to make your own, that's a good one to get a hold of. Let's get to the bottom section here now. It's really nice because you've got some deep lines here. And the way this wipes off, we're going to get a good accumulation here underneath the corner where the walkway and the panels meet that back there. So let's go ahead and now move on to the dividing walls. Okay, so I've reassembled the parts here again for you just to show you how this all looks now that the wash has been applied, and I'm very pleased with the results. I don't think at this time, though, I do need to do anything further here with any other detailing solutions like the MIG ammo products. I may turn to those a little later as I work on some of the other parts of the diorama, but for now, I think what I'll do is turn to the other smaller parts like the doors and some equipment and panels that need to go onto these walls. And there's also a ladder that goes into this last section here that goes from the floor up to the upper walkway, which needs to be painted gunmetal. So these are the different attachments that are provided here for the wall. We've got these instrument panels that include a hose attachment back here. We've got a speaker, a clock, and a telephone. And these are reference pictures that are included with the kit. You can see the telephone here and a speaker, but could not find one for the clock nor the hose attachment. So what I decided to do was to first paint the parts black. Then I painted it with a gunmetal and decided just to use a toothpick here to paint in some details. The face of the clock with a light gray. Got black for the speaker and just some reds and blues for some buttons there just to add some color. At the moment I wanted to show you the doors. These now are doors are included here. There are 3 of them. This is a reference picture of the doors. So I just chose to use the gunmetal for the framing and light gray for these light colored panels here. The kit does come with some decals. I'm not sure if you can pick this up on the camera, but this says tool room here. And on the opposite side it says hangar bay 1. And we have one here for the walkway. So the instrument panels were easy to attach with super glue, and I put them in place as indicated by the instructions. Okay, well the final step here now is to apply the decals, and these are ones which designate the repair bay and stall numbers. I ended up using the decals for 01 and 02. The decals are easy to work with and come off the sheet within just a few seconds of immersing them in water, and I used a small amount of thin clear Elmer's to help with adherence. And a couple other final touches. First is the ladder that I painted in gunmetal here. And I almost overlooked this, but this bottom section of this wall panel is also supposed to be painted duck egg blue. Well, with the exception of installing the handrail, and by the way, that handrail is going to be supported by these parts here, and he's provided a strip of styrene for the handrail itself. And of course, that's going to be installed along that walkway that overlooks the landing bay. But I thought it'd be a good idea to leave all that stuff off right now because the next step will be to move on to the lighting. And I didn't want to take a chance of snapping anything off while I'm maneuvering wires and stuff to feed and install those LEDs. So I thought it'd be a good idea to end part 1 here, and part 2 then we'll pick up with the lighting and creation of the display base. I might go back to these parts and add a few more details, or at least a little more weathering, but I'm going to wait to do that until I'm further along down the line here. Well, before I go here, a special thank you to modeler Donald Demers, who's the guy who provided not only the blueprints, but also a link to a whole host of pictures there on Flickr. They were put up by a gentleman named Larry Stringer, who was involved with the production of Battlestar Galactica. And so if you're interested in looking at these or just want to take a look at some of the props and things they used on the show, take a look at that. The link has been provided below. And an extended thank you also to Doug Drexler, who was instrumental in providing Donald Demers with a lot of help in creating those blueprints, which in turn were used to create this great looking kit. I'm really impressed with the level of attention to detail they put forth here to create a nice, accurate replica of the Galactica Landing Bay. And of course, yet another example of what 3D printing has brought to our hobby. Alright guys, thanks again for watching. If you have any questions, as usual, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at interestingmodeler@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.